Hello, everybody. Hello. Thank you for joining our webinar. It's going to be fun. Let's give it a couple minutes here while people trickle in. We'll get started in, a minute or so. So much to talk about. We're lucky here to have Tom. He's our head of global trade at Passport. He'll give his own intro in a second, but UPS vet has been with us for almost 5 years now. And we've worked on a lot of cool stuff, huh, Tom? When the UK Brexit changes
Yeah,
happened,
so many changes.
yeah,
Uh,
every
more
year
in the
there's something.
Definitely, yeah. More in the past 5 years and the past 20, I think.
Totally, totally. What's that quote? There's weeks when nothing happened, and there's weeks when decades happen. So
Yeah.
definitely one of
Oh,
those.
well, last
So
weekend was a was a decade as well.
yeah,
That was nuts.
yeah, totally, totally. All right, we got a ton of people. Great. Let's get started. Let's get started. So I'll do a quick intro on myself. Tom would love to get your intro as well, and then we'll go through our agenda and we'll get into it. So much interesting stuff to talk about. So about me, my name is Alex Yancher. I'm the CEO of Passport. I started the company about almost 8 years ago now. We're an end-to-end internationalization solution. Um, we actually just bought a company that helps brands do in-country fulfillment in US, in Canada, UK, Australia, EU. The timing couldn't be more perfect. It's definitely a great way of, as much as possible, mitigating some of these tariff risks and de minimis going away and all of that. But anyways, that's not about that. Tom, you want to give your intro?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Tom Taggart. As Alex was saying, almost 5 years at Passport, heading up the global trade team here, which is really all things compliance, customs, trade, and tax and product. Two constants in my background, I think, are policy and international shipping. Spent about 4 years on Capitol Hill working for a U.S. senator. I was a State Department Foreign Service officer and spent a decade at UPS building international shipping solutions and even sailed cargo ships for a while. So this is a perfect role where I get to meld those two things, policy and international shipping.
Awesome. Well, excited to have this conversation with you, Tom. Let's go through what we're going to talk about. There's a lot we can talk about, so had to be a little bit of editors here on the things that I think are going to be most interesting for our network here, which is, I would say, direct to consumer brands. Obviously, everybody's omni-channel now, but really that's the core audience for us here. So we're going to be focusing on that business irrespective of where you manufacture goods. Important to know, what's going on in this world. So let's see. We're going to talk about. We're going to go through a recap of what's been going on. Where do we stand? What do we know? What do we not know? What are we still waiting to hear? What did we learn? So what's kind of here for sure, and some details around that. What are some misconceptions in the market that we've been seeing? And what are the release valves, like the workarounds that still exist in this market that we want to share with the group here and have this be a open discussion where we can field some questions and would love to hear. There's very smart people on this call. I know a lot of them, so would love to hear your opinions as we go through it as well. And then, of course, we'll end with, what are some of our recommendations? How are brands reacting? What are 3PLs doing here in the US to help? And we'll take it from there. And then we'll leave the last, call it 20 minutes for some questions. So, Tom, let's start with a recap. Where do things stand now?
Yeah, a lot better than we were on Saturday when we had three U.S. tariffs and three proposed retaliatory tariffs, and now we're down to just U.S. Tariff on Chinese made products, all goods that are products of China or Hong Kong that are imported into the U.S., regardless of where they're shipped from. are now faced with a 10% duty, in addition to any other duties that applied, the normal tariff rate, the Section 301 duties. So that was a big change that just went in effect yesterday. Also has some other impacts that we'll talk about, like exclusion from de minimis, impact for mail shipments requiring formal entry. And on the other side of the house, we have China placing a retaliatory tariff on U.S. products that mainly impact energy, coal, natural gas, crude oil. So not a direct impact to our e-commerce merchants, but certainly a step toward retaliation for the tariffs that went into effect yesterday.
Tom, there was one misconception I kept reading about, that Trump is punishing our allies, Canada and Mexico, more than China. They're getting 25% and China is getting 10%. And I thought, while that's technically true, we had essentially a zero tariff regime with Canada and Mexico before. So now net, they would have been in theory 25%, but China already had very high tariffs. So it went up all the way, I think the number is 39% for certain fashion and apparel items. So now we're talking 39% plus 10%. So the top end of that range was going to be 49% for tariffs on Chinese-made goods versus Canada and Mexico 25. Am I thinking about that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Around 2018, the additional tariffs for China started. So, on top of the normal tariff rate, the Section 301 tariffs, as they're called, applied to most e-commerce goods that you'll find, especially apparel, footwear, and that was 15 to 25% additional duty on top of whatever the standard tariff rate was. So another 10% on top of the normal tariff and the 301 tariffs really adds up for some brands. And as you say, you're getting close to 40% in some product categories.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. So what do we learn? Um, we learned that for sure the Chinese duties are here to stay for now. They're not going away in this Mexico, Canada sort of way where we're going to have to wait 30 days, but highly unlikely they're going to be implemented at this point. It seems like Trump got the concessions he was looking for. Um, Still unclear 100%, but it's looking more and more like it. But it looks like the Chinese tariffs are here to stay. It looks like the de minimis on Chinese country of origin goods is here to stay. What else are we waiting to hear about? And it's still unclear, Tom.
Yeah, the two big unknowns coming into this were what's going to happen with the U.S. de minimis, which is currently at $800. So any shipment that's going to a U.S. consignee that's under $800 in value, once per day, you can enter that free of duties under Section 321. De minimis Type 86 goes by a number of names, but what it means is that no duties or fees are paid on those goods. And there were customs did issue two notices of proposed rulemaking, which is how they proposed to make some changes to the de minimis and put it out there for public comment. Those were thought to address the de minimis issue for China. One of the proposals was to exclude all products that were under the Section 301 duties. And that was really preempted with this additional tariffs that went into effect by executive order. As now it's clear that there is no de minimis for anything that is a product of China or Hong Kong. And so that eliminates the question right there of whether de minimis is going to apply for China going forward. And then you had the issue of how is this going to be implemented going forward? I think, as you were mentioning there about China, Canada, and Mexico, we have a reprieve until March 4th, and ideally we'll come up with a permanent solution before then so that we aren't faced with the 25% tariffs on goods from Canada and Mexico. But we did see that both countries were willing to retaliate and sorting out the details of what that would mean to merchants if there were additional tariffs placed on goods that were shipped to Canada and Mexico.
Interesting. How about the de minimis for goods made in Vietnam and India? Has there been anything said or written about that that you know of?
I think that's the to be determined. And one thing that came out of the January 20th executive order for America First was a complete review of those notices of proposed rulemaking, which means instead of a 90-day comment period, they've really been put on hold. And the administration has instructed their department heads to get back with a proposal by April 1st of how to change the de minimis, how to impact this long term. So now we're in a bit of a holding pattern until that April 1st deadline, and we see something in writing that indicates where the policy is going to head long term for other countries that could be impacted by de minimis, not just goods that are from China or Hong Kong. But today, Vietnam, Indonesia, the de minimis still applies to those goods that are products of those countries that are actually manufactured or made in those countries. And well, I think we'll have a sense of a longer term policy here in the next couple of months.
So, today, the de minimis is still active for goods made in really any country other than China or Hong Kong. Um, Taiwan, I guess
Yeah.
that one, it's still active for that one. Um, so what's your opinion? Will the de minimis go away? How should we be thinking about this? If you're a betting man, what are the odds you place on it going away? And also when? When is also a key point. So you're saying for sure until April that de minimis is going to stay for, Vietnam, India made goods. And then after that, what do you think?
Yeah, a lot of speculation on what changes. The interesting thing about the de minimis going away for China products is we're going to see the impact on U.S. import and customs clearance, and that was really the purpose of the de minimis to start with. Is it literally means a trivial thing that it costs more to try to assess the duties on this item than it does to collect the actual duties on it. So things did speed through customs in a very streamlined, reduced customs clearance method. And we'll get a good indication of how much that's going to impact the volume coming in today. Does the number change from 800 to something else? It did have to be a pretty low number. I think if you look at the stats, uh, 80% of de minimis shipments are under 50 US dollars. So how low do you have to go for it to really impact de minimis or low value shipments is the real question. So I think we'll have a number of actions. One thing that is certain is the amount of data that is going to be required is going to definitely increase. Today, the Section 321 entry is very basic. There's very little oversight. If you just look at the names of the consumers that are reported, it is comical. That Disney is still very popular. That Donald Duck is one of the most popular consignees that you'll see listed under a 321 entry or just customer. So that is one of the biggest impacts is that they're going to require more information. Who actually is a consignee? Who's the shipper? What is the HS code? What is this commodity? Where is it really shipped from? And there will be a lot more electronic data for customs to use to target some of the bad actors and to have better data on imports that are coming in.
Yeah, so let's talk about USPS and the postal network here and what all this means. So we saw news yesterday that USPS is suspending accepting parcels from China and Hong Kong Post. That was actually very big news because I'm guessing those are the two biggest international customers for USPS. Maybe Canada Post is number three or somewhere up there. But that was big news. And then earlier this morning, like a couple of hours ago, they announced that they're reversing that decision, right? Was
That's
the
right.
was the issue that they were just at a loss on how they were going to accurately clear those packages and collect duties? And like, where are they landing? Are they actually going to be collecting duties? So let's say a grandma, forget even as a business shipment, a grandma goes to her local Chinese post office and wants to ship a box of cookies to her daughter living in San Francisco. What's going to happen? Who's going to have to pay duties? That nobody's ever had to pay duties for something like that. What's the situation?
Yeah, yeah. I think the personal gifts will still be excluded for postal shipments internally. But the interesting thing is that this was implemented with a really good intent, right? You're getting terrible data, you want to fix it. So the only other option is for postal clearance is a formal entry. There's really no in between. They're not open to the same customs clearance procedures that commercial carriers would have in place. So it's really just a very basic postal clearance, or it's a formal entry, which requires a lot of data, a lot of paperwork, often a customs broker, a U.S. importer, a customs bond. The level of scrutiny goes up, and you do have much more oversight. Is that practical for postal shipments? Not likely. So the initial reaction was, there's no way to enforce it. We have no mechanism to clear postal through a formal clearance, and we're not even getting country of origin and the electronic data. So how are we going to know if something is a product of China to start with? So the initial reaction was, let's take a minute and figure out how to get through this. And USPS and CBP, U.S. Customs are working toward a long-term solution now. But it's back on. It's back on, and USPS is accepting shipments from China and Hong Kong, and we'll have to go forward with a solution. But it's very similar to what we see in other countries around the world. If you ship something to Canada that's postal, and it is actually assessed duties and taxes, then the Postal Service collects on delivery, or they ask the consumer to come down to the post office and pay the duties and taxes that are owed. And it's going to be something very, very similar here. The way formal entry works is that the consignee would be contacted, and they'd have to go to the nearest customs office, which could
Oh
be
my
many,
God.
many hours away, depending on.
You're saying that unless something changes, that when somebody from China, forget the gift example, let's say the grandma sold the box of cookies on eBay, and she's sending that China Post, which is going to go through USPS, and it's a rule. Yeah, you got to pay. There is zero de minimis. You got to pay duties on this product. Even if the duty's $2, doesn't matter. You got to pay those duties. USPS legally can't deliver it to your home and give it to you. Somebody has this liability. They got to pay it. So you're saying going forward, the USPS is going to be going to everybody's door, leaving a note on their door saying, here's a website. That's a startup idea. That's a startup idea.
It is. How do you even
To
contact
streamline
a?
it, yeah,
Yeah.
sell this solution to USPS. That's a startup idea. Maybe we should do it. Um, but I mean, is that what's really going to happen? That's how Canada
Yeah,
Post does it, right? I mean, what other options
right.
are
And
there?
that's why there is really no process for formal entry today, because it's not practical for you to send a 7501 customs entry form to a consumer and say, fill this out, or go find a customs broker to do it. It's a lot
Right.
of information, and if you don't know how to complete the fields, it's a big learning curve. So it is definitely not sustainable to put that on the consumer, and there does have to be some sort of intermediary to facilitate it.
Okay, follow-up question. That's USPS. I wonder what they're going to do now before they even have the mechanism to leave that note on the door. Are they just going to let it go without assessing duties? That's actually what the Canada Post does today. They don't check every package. They, even when duties are owed, they still don't charge it. So that's probably what's going to end up happening for a period of time while they catch up. How about UPS and FedEx? What are they going to do on a DDP shipment from China to a US consumer? Are they going to bill it back to, and are they going to offer a DDU shipment where they have to front the money and go and leave this note on the customer door? What do you think is going to happen with UPS and FedEx on this?
Yeah, yeah, and they will today. You still have this bill receiver option where the carrier will come to your door or leave a tag that says, "Here's the duties and taxes that you owed. We paid this on your behalf, and now we're gonna charge you those taxes plus a disbursement fee and some other processing fees on top of it." It's really a COD process is what it is. It's not efficient, as you can imagine, but that is a standard process today. They're really for China goods, and that's another misconception is that formal entry is the only option. The rules do say, and the customs guidance does say informal entry is also an option, but there is a catch there where formal entry is required for anything that's over 2,500 in value or regulated by a government agency. You're shipping an alligator skin belt, and that's has to go through an official wildlife certification process. So that has to be a formal entry, but informal entry is also eligible for goods from China and Hong Kong. The catch is it has to be under $250 in value. And if it is, then they can go through a more simplified customs clearance process called informal entry, where sometimes the customs bond is waived and you have lighter requirements, less data set, fewer documents that would need to be submitted to support your entry. But it is a valid entry type for this method. The kicker here is really what they're going to do about the merchandise processing fee. It's still at least $4 for a
Merchandise processing fee? What is that?
yeah, so good question, and something that has never been faced for companies that are just shipping de minimis today, right? Because it's clearing free of duties and taxes. But it's a fee depending on the entry, whether it's a formal entry fee, there's a minimum and a maximum. And if it's an informal entry fee, depending on the value, it's a tiered minimum that you would pay for the clearance. So if you're clearing one shipment to one consumer, informal entry, you're going to pay a minimum, which is called the merchandise processing fee, in addition to any the additional 10% duties that are going to be required, and any other tariff rate, 301 tariffs that would apply on top of that shipment. So there's a process in place today to execute this. It's going to require a lot of work, though. You can imagine just if you're going to clear the goods on a consumer's behalf, and it is a formal entry, getting a power of attorney to act on their behalf as their customs broker. Just that process right there breaks the flow of goods and does stall
I mean, but this
commerce.
is this is a DDP shipment. We do DDP today into
Mhm.
Canada, UK, all the major markets. There's a way of doing it where things move pretty quickly. So this industry is going to have to stand something up very quickly so that these things don't get in the way, and there could be just a standard DDP process. I'm guessing UPS and FedEx are on top of it, and they're able to make this work. But those fees, unfortunately, I think are going to be pretty high. Let's back up. Let's talk about what are can you break down what are the ways of clearing packages into the US today? Like Section 321, Type 86, that's the under de minimis. Okay, everybody knows about that one. That's a famous one. That one's going away. You
Yeah.
talked about informal. It only works to make sure I got this. Informal only works when the value is under 250
Yeah, for products from China.
for
So
products from China.
this is an interesting exclusion where the normal rule is if it was over $800 and under $2,500, you could use informal clearance, also called Type 11 clearance.
Mhm.
But since this is subject to the new duties that to get technical are in Chapter 99, Subchapter 3 of the Harmonized Tariff Schedule, that means they are excluded from that $2,500 limit. The limit goes down to 250, and
Mm.
this only applies now for goods that are valued from $0 to $250 if they are China or Hong Kong origin products.
I don't want to derail us, but valued, are you talking about the retail cost that the consumer pays, or are you talking about the cost of goods sold?
Yeah, that is a good question, and it's one of the biggest struggles for customs is undervaluation. Nobody wants to report the actual value of the product because it directly impacts the amount of duties and taxes you're going to be paying. If a product has sold to an end consumer in the U.S., customs is going to be looking for that price the consumer paid, that transaction value they paid. And to support that, they may ask for a sales receipt that says, okay, how much did you collect from this consumer at checkout? So if you're reporting something lower and say it's the cost of goods, it's the replacement cost, that really is not compliant, and it's not going to hold up for you to be able to claim that. They are going to be looking for the retail price that the consumer paid.
Interesting. We're going to come back to that one. There's something called the first sale rule, which we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes. I want to come back to that point. Let's circle back to USPS. We have a question here related to it, and I actually wanted to use it as an opportunity to also ask about something really interesting that maybe will be of use to people on this call. First, a question. So, what does USPS expect to do with this massive increase in undelivered packages? Wouldn't it cost them more to hang onto it, return to shipper, than it would be to simply deliver it? Um, yeah, it's a great question. So this is a problem that all posts have that have either done away with their tax de minimis or duty de minimis. The way Canada Post handles it is just they only check 10% of packages, maybe even less. And their hope is that when they do those 10% randomly, they're going to discourage businesses, which equate to the bulk 95%, if not more, of these shipments in the first place. They're going to discourage ones from either lying or shipping it DDU, deliver duties unpaid, and kind of push people to deliver duties paid so the problem for them goes away. And for most businesses, it works. You don't want 10% of your customers getting a note on their door saying you owe more money. It's just too big of a headache. So businesses have adopted, brands, e-commerce merchants have adopted DDP really across the board so that they could make this problem go away. That's probably what's going to happen. It's probably going to start with only 1% of packages, given the sheer volume, are assessed. They're going to get clever about how they do spot checks. They're going to adopt technology. And over time, they're going to check every product at some point. In fact, in Canada, one of the ports, I think it's the Vancouver port, they actually do check every single item. So this 10% thing that I'm talking about is where they haven't been able to adopt that technology yet. Um, the other interesting thing about this, more to the point of post just lacking the resources and not being able to handle it, something very interesting is happening, which is that what happens when you ship a China-made good through the postal network outside of China and Hong Kong? So let's say you're in Canada and you ship your merchandise to the US through Canada Post. Well, to my knowledge, there's no requirement of putting a country of origin. Like legally, you don't need to put a country of origin when you're shipping through a postal system. And moreover, USPS is receiving this package from Canada. They have no idea where this package was made or where this item was made. Is it made in China? Is it made in Vietnam, India, Canada? It could be made in Canada. And they are so overloaded with packages from China that they have to deal with now with this new regime. They definitely won't have time to look into the Canadian ones. This is not advice, by the way, just thinking through what I think might end up happening. But it seems like this might be a technically legal loophole that's going to exist for a period of time where you can ship through Canada Post. And of course, that liability might exist, but likely Canada Post is going to hand it over to USPS, and they're just not going to have the capacity to really check any of those packages and assess it for duties and taxes. What do you think about that, Tom? Does that make sense?
Not really, but it was intentional that the language doesn't specifically mention the country of origin, and part of that is there's really no way to it is, as you mentioned, it's optional today. There's a field for it on the postal declaration, How often is that completed? I can't imagine very often, especially as it is an optional field. So no good way to even know what's in the box other than opening the box and looking for a made in label, a product of label. And without that, I don't know how you enforce it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's something interesting, like a little bit of a opening, unintentional opening, at least for now, while all the dust settles. Um, Super interesting. So I think we already went through a lot of the misunderstandings. So Canada and Mexico being punished more with tariffs than China, not quite accurate. Some truth to it, but not quite accurate. Um, the Chinese packages requiring formal clearance, we talked about that. That seems to only be a requirement for postal. Is that right?
Yeah, informal clearance is still an option for China, Hong Kong products that are clearing through a commercial stream or just going with a courier, an express carrier, air freight forwarder, anything other than a postal carrier.
Yep. Okay. And then one last misconception that I saw circling over the last few days is that the duty drawback privilege has been removed from China. That is actually not the case. It's only partially the case. It's been removed for the incremental 10% duties and not for the duties that existed before, which were actually much higher than the 10%. Is that correct, Tom?
Yeah, that's right. And just to explain a little bit about what drawback is, it's a way to recover 99% of the duties and fees that were paid on a product that's imported into the US and then exported in the same condition. So that's the most common case for e-commerce merchants is that you're importing finished products and you're exporting them to consumers around the world, and it's in the same condition. It hasn't been altered or tailored or manipulated. And there is a mechanism through US duty drawback to recover 99% of those duties and fees that were paid. And that's everything. That's the tariff, the 301 tariffs that we mentioned, they're eligible. The merchandise processing fee, if it's like comes in on a cargo vessel, a ship, it's the harbor maintenance fee. All of that's eligible for drawback, except this 10% additional tariff that just went into effect yesterday. That's the only thing that's excluded.
Interesting. Interesting. Um, Super interesting. All right. One more big topic, then let's talk about how brands are and 3PLs are handling this. We actually have some great questions about it. So I have $1 billion question, $100 billion potentially question here for you. Can Chinese sellers, Temu, Shein, direct-to-consumer brands that manufacture in China, can they declare the cost of goods sold when they're importing into the US and shipping it to a consumer directly? Or do they have to declare the retail sale price that this US consumer paid? What is your view on that?
I think they're going to declare costly goods regardless of whether it's allowed or compliant. And that's the starting point. But there is a mechanism, and the US is one of the only countries in the world that really allows this and has rules and precedent around it called the first sale for export, where if you're a middleman, a merchant buying from a manufacturer and selling to an end consumer, you can claim the cost that you paid that manufacturer for your goods, but only under certain cases. And the requirements are very stringent and onerous to comply with, but there is a way to do it. And many large merchants do this. I think if you look at some of the top retailers, they're taking advantage of this, especially if they have a direct-to-consumer program. But they spend a lot of time with trade lawyers putting this into place where it is compliant, and they have gotten interpretations from customs that this model will work so that they are not assessed back taxes on what could be tens of millions of dollars worth of duties. You know, it's the difference between the retail price that you sell to your consumer and the price that you pay your merchant, that can be very significant. And Customs is aware of this. They don't like the rule. They would like to change it, but it exists today. It's a precedent. It's something that has been argued in the international trade courts, and it exists. It is a possibility to set it up that way to compliantly claim the cost of goods that you paid. Your merchant, and not the sale price that you got from your end consumer.
Wait till Elon gets wind of this. Um, so let's say a merchant does this, and let's say it turns out that they weren't allowed to do this, or they lacked the documentation to prove to CBP that they were allowed to do this. Can CBP actually go back and say, "Hey, you sold this thing for $100. I get it that you bought it from your Chinese manufacturer for 10. You paid me only $2 of tariff. You need to go pay me $18 more because 20 of 100 is $20." Can that actually happen? Can they go back in arrears and send you a bill for everything that they think you owe them because you're missing some documentation or something? Is that how it works?
Yeah, absolutely, and they do quite often, especially for formal entry. They will send you a request for further information and want to take a look at all your documents related to a particular entry. And if you cannot demonstrate that it was a legitimate sale, that the terms of sale were in place, title, ownership, insurance, Incoterms, everything that has to check the box to say that you can actually claim cost of goods, absolutely. And this is really one of those guilty until proven innocent. They will assess the duties based on the retail price, the sale price to the consumer, the end consumer, and it's up to you to appeal it and to fight it. So you're it's an uphill battle from there, but it is certainly the standard process is for them to audit shipments, and if they don't agree with the way you've determined the value for that product, certainly. But it's one of the reasons that you'll see a scramble to use this informal entry is that there are lighter requirements, right? You don't really you can clear it yourself if you wanted, if you had the capability to. In many cases, you can have the customs bond waived. So I think you're going to see some merchants try to exploit the simplified clearance process there under that Type 11 or informal entry
Mm,
because of this.
mm. Honestly, I would be very nervous to clear my products at the cost of goods sold and potentially build up this enormous business ending liability for myself. This has really not been tested because of this $800 de minimis. Every time I go and research this, I find, I think we found, Tom, 140 appeals to CBP. It's super complicated and it's really ambiguous. There's been cases where it's a direct-to-consumer sale, exactly, what we're talking about here,
Yeah.
and CBP has said no to it. And these are very sophisticated participants who try to follow the letter of the law and shared their research and their setup with CBP, and CBP came back and said still no. So the fact that I'm hearing some merchants right now declaring the COGS and YOLOing the incremental duty costs, it feels like playing with fire. It feels like playing with fire. I think it's definitely possible. I mean, possible, but I think you
Yeah.
need to get an opinion, not from your lawyer who, you pay him to write what you want him to write, but you're getting this opinion from CBP. And hopefully actually CBP comes out with like a flyer that it really explains their position and makes it clear,
Yeah.
and really spells out exactly what they're looking for this specific use case of direct to consumer, given it really is not that clear right now, to be honest. Um, Anyways, all right, let's move on. It's
That's
it's
good.
already 10:40. We have some really great questions. Let's start going through them. Let's start taking questions.
Yeah.
And actually, I think some of these are going to weave nicely into our last topic, which is, how are brands responding? So a lot of these questions are for brands. So let's take it one by one here. Tom, you want to do this first one? I think you wrote here, Tom would like to answer this question. Go for it, Tom.
Yeah, this is a good question. So a Canadian baby apparel brand products are all made in China, but most of the business is shipping to U.S. consumers, probably under 321 today and duty free. So the Canadian tariffs, the 25% tariff that the U.S. was going to impose on Canada origin products is it been postponed at least to March 4th, and we hope there is a solution that is enacted before then to make it go away permanently. But as it stands today, any goods that are made in China are going to face that 10% additional China tariff, regardless of where they ship from. So it doesn't have to ship, even if it ships from Canada, it's still a country of origin is China, and the 10% tariffs do apply.
But let's say the 25 tariffs, they do happen. Let's say for argument's sake, in this case, they would not have to pay the 25% tariffs because the goods are made in China and
That's right.
the tariffs play off of the country of origin, not the from country.
That's right. That is a
Yeah.
good distinction. So you're not double penalized. It is based on where the goods are made, manufactured, what they consider as the actual country of origin, not just the ship from country. The ship from country really doesn't have any impact on the U.S. tariffs that were proposed.
Yeah. So in summary, you're only going to be hit with a 10% China tariff, not
That's
the
right.
not the 25%. Awesome. All right, next question. Canadian business who sells Chinese-made products mostly to Americans, is it worth it now to open a fulfillment center in the US? And assuming I will have to pay tariffs bringing the products across the border to the new USA fulfillment center, is that
Yeah.
correct? Yeah, it's a great question. So I think that there's a few other details at play here, like what your volume is and what your average order value is and so forth. But I would say this is a answer for the new regime, the post de minimis world regime that we're living in. It also matters whether or not you believe that you can declare the cost of goods sold on your shipment from Canada to US, or do you have to declare the retail cost? Again, our position, my personal view on this is that it's ambiguous. I wouldn't take the risk because if you're wrong, it's catastrophic. If you're not wrong, okay, then you've been collecting the correct amount and you could, um, uh, do the in-country fulfillment in US and pay the COGS when you enter into the US. That's the biggest savings here is that if you believe you have to pay the duty on the retail cost, then I think it's a no-brainer to do in-country fulfillment in the US because you're paying that 20%, maybe 30%, all the way up to 49%. You're paying that on the COGS, not on the retail cost. That's, game changer in terms of decision making. I should plug our solution here. This is what we do at Passport. We help brands very quickly set up in-country fulfillment in the US for non-American brands. We do it for American brands into Canada, UK, Australia. So please reach out to me. This is a high priority for our company and our team. We have like a special crack team set up for onboarding this type of use case given the situation. So just email me directly at alex@passportglobal.com. So yeah, that's kind of my take. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Tom.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. I'd say if you do have consumers outside the US, I imagine the majority are in the US, but if 20% or more are non-US consumers and you're fulfilling from the US, absolutely I would pursue a duty drawback. It can certainly be worth it. It's a lengthy process. It can take you up to a year to get approved for drawback privileges. But once you do, you can go back up to 5 years and reclaim all the duties and fees that were paid on these goods that you're describing now that you import into a U.S. fulfillment center, and then you're exporting in the same condition. So
Great.
it's a good option, and the sooner you start, the sooner the clock for 5 years goes into. And as soon as you file, that's when the clock starts to go back 5 years.
Yep. Great. Okay, another great question. We are actively preparing for a 25% tariff for our shipments going to Canada, regardless of what happens. What are the best steps we can be taking now to prepare for this? This is especially concerning for our subscription customers and the risk of churn. Would you recommend sharing this price increase? Let's start with the last part of this question. What's a recommendation for passing along the duties to customers, and in what capacity? So because I think that the perception on this Canada, Mexico, and retaliatory US tariff is it's going to be a temporary one, my recommendation would be to break it out as a separate line item so that you don't create a perception that your product is more expensive than it is on a permanent basis. And people get it, they'll understand. This is, maybe you kind of like put like a funny line about it, you have a sense of humor about it. People will pay that 25%. They get it, it's temporary, especially the subscription ones. They're
Yeah.
hopefully not going to break the relationship, knowing that at some point in the next 2, 3 months, it's probably going to go away as this gets figured out. If we're talking about something more permanent, like the Chinese 10% tariffs, the best practices recommendation. We've been doing this for almost a decade now at Passport, helping brands figure out their pricing strategy globally, and taxes, VATs, tariffs, they're always coming into play. The best practice in the industry is that you actually bake in the price, you actually bake in the duty and the tax into the price of the good, especially if it's that way in a localized environment. So we're not used to, in the US, for example, seeing in an order, we are used to seeing taxes broken out. That's fine, keep it that way. But we're not used to seeing duties broken out, you know? So I wouldn't break out an extra line item. It's going to be confusing. It's going to be distraction. It's going to lower conversion rates. So that's my take on how to price this, the optics and the conversion rate optimization aspect there. In terms of preparing, your only real outlet, okay? By the way, the thing that we were talking about for shipping into US, can you declare the cost of goods sold? Can you declare the retail value? That's only for the US. I want to make that abundantly clear. That question, as murky as it is for the US, it's only murky in the US. For Canada, UK, Australia, EU, it's always the retail value. Always. There is no concept of first sale rule in those countries. So you're always paying tariffs on the sale cost. So the only way to mitigate that and pay, fine, you're going to have to pay duties, but at least pay it on the cost of goods sold. The only way to do that is to do in-country fulfillment. Another reason we acquired this company, Brand Access, that helps companies do in-country fulfillment. So that I would say is really the only way to meaningfully make a dent in this new, world protectionist tariff regime. All right, let's move on to the next question.
Yeah, I had
Okay,
one
go
thing
for it,
there,
Tom.
just to clarify on the Canadian proposal to place a 25% tariff on U.S. origin products. It was specific to certain commodities, so they have a list of HS8, which is the harmonized schedule code, the harmonized system code. You'll see it's up to 8 digits, and a defined list of commodities that were impacted. So step one, I think, is to get another determination there of what your harmonized system code is, what your commodity code is, and see if you really are impacted, or if it's not part of the 25% proposal if it does go into place. And one more thing I think we've seen merchants do is, if you can charge a membership fee for this subscription, that could be another approach
Mhm.
to spreading out the cost.
That is a great idea. That is a great idea, Tom. First of all, check your HS codes. Make sure this affects you in the first place. We ship for Seed, the nutraceutical company, and we check them, and it doesn't impact them. Canada is not trying to increase the cost of health and wellness products, as an example. So that's something important to check. And that's such a great other point, to have a subscription fee, something like that, something that's not dutiable, and moving the cost into something like that. So that's also a great idea. All right, next one. Given that Trump implemented the 10% tariff on Chinese goods via IEEPA, Do we expect the tariff to simply last until further notice, or is there any kind of precedent as to when this tariff might be removed? Go for it, Tom.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a new world, and what we have seen in the past for precedent or constitutional procedure, I think may be up for question. So we are going to see pushback here. You've already seen China has said they're going to file with the World Trade Organization, file a complaint, and see what happens there. They're going to challenge this in international trade courts and see what they can do to overturn it, because they don't view this as a path forward or way to implement it. So to be determined how long it lasts. I think it's going to play out on the world trade scene.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. All right. As a baby wear brand shipping from Canada into the US, made in China, am I exempt from anything because it is baby wear? Tom, go for it.
Yeah, and this is a tough one. It's a great question. So where Canada did carve out products that they said are not impacted. Really, anything from China is gonna be impacted. There's only a couple exceptions, like humanitarian donations,
Mm,
printed material, right? And if you are manufacturing products for sale, they're included. There
mm,
is no exemption.
mm. Interesting. One thing just to note, I do believe that baby clothes are VAT exempt in UK and EU,
Mhm.
and they have a lowered GST PST for Canada, if I'm not mistaken. Do you happen to know that, Tom?
Yeah, that is right, and I think that's where, and often the duty rate will be zero as well.
Yeah.
But that's depending on the destination, of course. And so it is weird to see baby wear be taxed at a full rate, or to have it penalized with additional tariffs. But in this case, that is the reality.
Yep. Yep. Interesting. Okay. Where can brands go to stay up to date on the changing tariff situation? For example, whether the March 4th delay will go through, will Passport's Trump Trade Tracker site continue to share the latest news and resources? Absolutely. Thank you for the question. Yes. We launched TrumpTradeTracker.com to basically post every interesting piece of news and analysis that it's personally vetted by Tom and myself. We've been doing this in our own Slack channel. So we thought, let's just launch a site. Let's start putting everything up there that we find interesting and trying to make it as current as possible. So it's kind of like a news feed of everything. So TrumpTradeTracker.com, we set that up. I think we're going to keep it going for at least a couple more months. So it's a good place to find the latest and greatest. Basically, see what me and Tom are reading. Um, all right, a line item of 25% tariffs on a high AOV of over 2,500. That's steep. That's right, Harrison.
Yeah.
Very steep. Yeah. All right. Canadian here, shipping goods to my USA customers. We usually drive packages across border and ship from my Blaine mailbox location, and we ship using USPS shipping labels. We don't send through Canada Post labels across the border. Will we still be hit with tariffs at border, the 10% for Chinese-made tariff? What do you think, Tom?
Well, the only it's a great question. The only exclusion here, if you are carrying it across, is really accompanied baggage. So, if you want to claim it that that's your personal accompanied baggage that you're bringing into the U.S. for a vacation, that's one thing. But aside from that, there are no exclusions for this case.
There are no exclusions. There you go. All right. Do you know if national health products are impacted by future Canadian tariffs to products that are being imported into Canada from the US? It seems like not as it stands right now, but anything can change.
Yeah,
Is that
there
fair?
there are some commodities in that 2106 HS code. So it really depends. You need to go out to the HS8, and that will tell you whether you are impacted, and we can include a link to that. But it really depends on what the product is. Is it a protein powder? Is it a nutritional supplement? Is it
Mm,
a vitamin?
mm.
Yeah, the range of natural health products is wide, and depending on where that falls in that HS8 is going to dictate whether, if this goes into effect, whether it does impact you.
Great. Um, Here's a good one, Tom. Maybe we can post this in the Q&A right now, if you have this readily available. Somebody, Emily's asking,
Yeah.
where can we find the list of the products that are not included in the list?
Hmm. Yeah. Let me pull it up right now and throw it in there.
All right, we're gonna post that. Um, where are you gonna post it in the chat, or how does that work?
Yeah, if that's possible, I can throw it in there, or I
Yeah,
think if we're sending anything out afterwards, we could attach it in the
yeah,
notes as well.
maybe, yeah, maybe if you're able to type in the answer in the Q&A here, maybe that'll be seen by people as well. All right, next question. Just to be clear, Canadian companies shipping China-made products into USA cannot be made to pay 25% tariff, correct? Only ever the 10%. That is correct. At least for the US threatened 25% tariffs on Canadian-made goods, not Canadian shipped from goods, but Canadian-made goods. That is correct. All right. How would crowdfunding rewards from China to USA be classified in value, RECOGS, MSRP?
Yeah.
That's next level
Yeah.
UC customs clearance into China. I don't know,
It,
to be honest. Tom, what do you think?
yeah, what you'll find is that if it has been pre-sold, customs is going to want you to declare that price, right? So that is the challenge. Anything that has been sold or even pre-sold, pre-sold is something that you will see in the case law and the rulings and the binding rulings here. So that's what they would ask you to declare, is the actual price that the consumer paid.
Yeah. All right. Next one.
Yeah,
Any
but
news on if how the Trump tariffs have had any impact on the decrees from the Mexican president that affected apparel brands who were fulfilling in Mexico? Okay, so this question might be related to what happened around Christmas with Imex and how the Mexican decree back then um, added tariffs and removed this program called IMIX that allowed American brands to import into Mexico essentially duty-free fashion and apparel, and then ship it under this 321 zero or 800 de minimis method from Mexico into US. Yeah, it's a good question. Well, certainly the tariffs, maybe the threatened tariffs, and who knows what was happening behind the scenes before the Trump administration started January 20th. So this IMEX change happened after Trump won, but before he started. So it's hard to say exactly what impact the threat of tariffs was going to have with that. I've heard that that was an independent decision that President
yeah,
Claudia Sheinbaum was working on, independent of anything US was doing, and this was in the works already. And it's just a coincidental
yeah.
announcement. But I don't know, Tom, if you have any other interesting things to add about that.
Yeah, and the intent makes sense, right? The MX program was designed to be a manufacturing program where you brought in raw materials and you completed them in Mexico. It never really designed to be a system where you import finished products and hold them in bond. But that's what it became, especially after the de minimis increased to 800 US. It really exploded in popularity. And now you have a whole ecosystem just south of the border that supports this model, and it went away overnight. And even though that there's been a stay on the decree, a lot of the damage has already been done. But I think those things were not really related to the potential tariffs, and more to this this idea that they can drive more manufacturing and textile industry in Mexico if you bring in raw materials and finish them in Mexico,
Right,
as opposed
right,
to bringing in finished goods.
right. Interesting. All right, last question, and we'll call it a day here. When I import from China to Canada, it stops first in the USA. Will we have to still pay tariffs if the address to ship to is Canada? Good question. What do you think, Tom? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I would definitely look at moving that in bond now. You
Mhm.
can bring it into the US. So when it comes to the US, it either has to enter the customs market, or you have to place it in a foreign trade zone, a bonded warehouse, or place it in bond and then move it. You can transit the US with it with a bonded carrier called a T&E bond. So it transits and then it's exported to Canada without ever entering the U.S. customs market, and that seems like an approach to pursue. Otherwise, yes, it does have to be a U.S. entry, and the fee will apply.
Interesting. All right. That's it, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, feel free to email me personally, alex@passportglobal.com. We're helping brands that are really heavily impacted by this move to in-country fulfillment into the US, into Canada. EU's next on Trump's, list of tariff threats. So I would try to get, if you can, if you have the volume, I would try to do in-country fulfillment at this point. That's your best bet of at least having the tariff be hit on your cost of goods sold and not your retail price. I wouldn't play games with this first sale rule. It's just too big of a risk right now. I would wait until CBP comes out with a ruling, an explicit ruling that says they're going to accept this in on what circumstances, and make sure your circumstances meet that. So yeah, email me, alex@passportglobal.com. Thank you so much for tuning in. Tom, thank you so much for doing this with me. I appreciate it. This is a lot of fun.
Appreciate it. My pleasure.
All right. Bye, everybody.